Today, at approximately 10 a.m., our major crime investigators arrested the driver of the semi-trailer unit, Jaskarit Sidhu, a 29-year-old male from Calgary, Alberta.
That was Curtis Zablocki with the Saskatchewan RCMP. As you heard, they've made an arrest connected to the Humboldt Broncos team bus crash, which happened exactly 3 months ago today. The team was on its way to a playoff game in Nipawin April 6th when it crashed with a semi. 14 people aboard the bus died initially. 2 others in critical condition later died in hospital. 13 people survived, many of them with serious injuries. The driver of the semi was taken into custody and then released with mental health supports directly after the crash. Now, the truck involved belonged to Calgary-based Adeshti Trucking Limited. By April 10th, the safety certificate for the company had been suspended. On April 18th, RCMP provided an update on the investigation. Basic details of the crash were revealed. The bus was heading northbound on Highway 35, the semi-trailer coming from the east on Highway 335. The semi had a stop sign and the bus did not. On April 19th, the intersection of Highways 35 and 335 was closed as forensic collision reconstruction analysts staged a reenactment using a similar weighted truck and coach bus. The investigation continued over the next 2 months, and now RCMP have laid charges. The CBC's Adam Hunter has more.
At 10 o'clock this morning, RCMP arrested 29-year-old Jaskarit Singh Sidhu in Calgary without incident. He was the man behind the wheel of the semi-trailer that collided with the Humboldt Broncos bus on April 6th. Sidhu is charged with 16 counts of dangerous operation of a motor vehicle causing death and 13 counts of dangerous operation of a motor vehicle causing bodily harm.
For causing dangerous driving causing death, it's upwards of 14 years. Dangerous driving causing bodily harm is upwards of 10 years.
The RCMP didn't reveal any more details on what may have caused the crash or what led to the charges after 3 months. They did not charge Sidhu with impaired driving. RCMP also told the victims' families about the charges in Saskatchewan and in Edmonton.
Our investigators were thorough in their systematic analysis of this evidence. I could further tell you that this morning, our investigators met with the families to inform them of the outcome of this investigation.
There were 20 investigators working on this file. Police conducted 60 interviews and took 6,000 photographs. Now, Sidhu will remain in police custody. He'll appear in court in Saskatchewan next week. There is no word on where or when. Adam Hunter, CBC News, Regina.
Now, here's what we know about Sidhu at this point. He had worked for Adeshti Trucking for 1 month prior to the fatal collision, according to owner Sukhmander Singh. Singh says Sidhu trained with him for 2 weeks and was driving on his own for 2 more weeks before the crash. The RCMP have said that Singh was in the intersection when the bus crashed into it. Ryan Strasnitsky was one of the people riding that bus on April 6th. He was paralyzed and is receiving treatment for his injuries. His mother, Michelle, was with him today when they spoke to reporters. They say the charges may offer some closure, but nothing will change what happened. Both the team and the driver will have to live with what happened for the rest of their lives.
I mean, there's no say for me. I mean, that's up to the cops and the police, so and the court system. So whatever happened for a reason.
It's not really, it doesn't help you with closure or anything like that. It's not your focus.
No, not really. That was can't really change what's happened in the past. So yeah, whatever happened for a reason.
It doesn't sound like you necessarily blame the fella that was behind the wheel there.
His intention wasn't to go out and hurt us that day, but mistake obviously is going to change his life and change all of our lives. So yeah, it's just not good.
Yeah, he's handling it fairly well, but I'm a little bit more. I'm glad that things are happening. I don't know what the end result's going to be, but it's a start. In my opinion, industry changes need to be made countrywide, and if this starts to affect change, then that's probably the best we can hope for.
Ryan seems resigned to the fact that this was, he didn't go out intending to do this, but should there still be a price to pay? Would you like to see this person serve some time for this?
I'm not sure if that's the answer. I know that Ryan's trying to focus on him and the boys getting better, and but as parents, I think we're looking for more than that.
Meanwhile, the Broncos organization has released a statement in response to today's charges. It reads in part, the Humboldt Broncos thank the RCMP and its investigators for their work. Organization has faith in the justice system, and we will be watching closely as this court process plays out. It goes on to say our primary focus continues to be supporting the survivors, families, and others that were directly impacted by the tragedy. And the Canadian Trucking Alliance has also released a statement. It offered condolences for the victims and also reads in part, currently, the facts of these cases that have led the RCMP to make these charges are not known to CTA. Once these facts are made available to CTA, the Alliance will examine opportunities with the provinces and federal government to make improvements to the commercial vehicle safety compliance system. We now know the number and nature of the charges in this case, but what will that mean in the coming months? Brian Pfefferly is a criminal defense lawyer based in Saskatoon and joins me now. Thank you so much for taking the time today, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
What was your reaction to the charges today?
A little bit surprised, I'll admit, not because of the time that had passed, but we see motor vehicle accidents all the time on Saskatchewan highways where accidents are caused, injuries are caused, and frankly, even death is caused. Unless it involves alcohol, it is unusual to some degree to see charges like dangerous driving causing death laid, although it's not a total shock. They have obviously looked at the circumstances and decided it was appropriate.
What will the Crown have to prove now going forward to have a chance at a conviction?
The obvious ones, obviously, they'll need to prove that the accused was the driver of the motor vehicle, and they'll need to prove that either death or injury was caused in the circumstances of each individual count. But the important part for the Crown, and the big hurdle always, is to prove that the driver acted in a manner which was criminally dangerous, which we often use the term a marked departure from the standard of a reasonably prudent driver, which basically means it's not just regular negligence, it's really serious negligence that constitutes something totally outside of what we'd expect normal people to be driving like.
So do you think that will be the biggest challenge in this case in particular for the prosecutors?
It's hard to say, but likely that's the case. We just have information being leaked in terms of the information that we know publicly, and I don't know anything more than any of the other members of the general public know about this particular case, but it would seem that that was probably what held up the prosecution's office and the police in terms of trying to see whether this was something that fit within that box. Looking at the circumstances, the manner in which the accident occurred, any statements made by either the driver or anybody else that was at the scene, and what happened before the accident occurred was definitely the focus of a lot of the investigation. Whether that was the hang-up or not, I guess time will tell.
And what do you think some of the defenses to this sort of a charge or charges will be?
Well, it's obviously important to remember that the Crown bears the burden of proof in a case like this. They have a burden, the burden doesn't shift to the accused. So the accused doesn't have to prove that they weren't dangerously driving. The Crown has to prove that they were dangerously driving. So the obvious angle that the defense will often look at is to look at whether an expert report that was done by the Crown, if there was any holes in that report, to get another expert to say that certain facts might be in dispute. There's also another potential technical defense. If there's any statements made by an accused person in a motor vehicle accident roadside, the admissibility of those statements can often be an issue. And the reason for that is that under provincial driving legislation, accused persons and drivers are required by law to give accident statements involving serious accidents like this. They're required to give statements to the police. It's actually compelled by the statute. But we also in Canada have a right to silence. So the conflicting right to silence and the compelled obligations under the traffic safety legislation can sometimes lead to fights over whether statements made by an accused person roadside or accident statements are in fact admissible against them in a criminal prosecution. So that's something to potentially look at, of course speculating on my behalf, but those are common issues that we see in these sorts of cases.
Well, if things do progress to the point of being found guilty, what are some of the penalties we could be looking at?
Because of the number of potential victims here, that's obviously going to be a significant factor. But if alcohol wasn't involved, involved sort of intentional conduct on behalf of the accused that was obviously going to cause serious death or injury. If those factors aren't involved, it could change the game. So the range is really quite vast. Definitely penitentiary time is what most people would be looking at for a death where dangerous driving would be proven. And certainly with the number of victims here, it could go all the way to double digits. And on dangerous driving alone, we have seen cases around Canada around the 6, 7, 8 year mark for serious cases involving multiple deaths. To my knowledge, for what it's worth, off the cuff, I don't know of any case in Canada involving this number of deceased people. If dangerous driving was in fact proven beyond a reasonable doubt, it would be a precedent-setting case in that regard, I'm sure.
A precedent-setting case, and one we'll have to wait a little while for. How long do you think something like this will take to make it to trial?
That's a bit of a moving target as well, but the range typically to get to a prelim would be 4 to 8 months. That would be a reasonable period of time, and it might even extend past that. Trial after that would be probably 18 months. So I'd be, unless there's a guilty plea, and who knows what could happen, if it goes to trial, expect it to take 18 months to 3 years in that time frame to get to trial, which is quite normal for the process to play out that way.
All right, well, we will have a little while to wait before that comes to fruition. Thank you so much, as always, for your insight on this today, Brian.
Thanks for having me.
Brian Pfefferly is a criminal defense lawyer based in Saskatoon.